Hey family, welcome back to my video. Today we will see, what if Naruto was pervert son of Aphrodite? Before we start, I would like to extend my sincere thanks to the original author of this story. Your generosity is greatly appreciated. Now enjoy the video. It had been a long night for Kushina. For the past 12 hours, she had been the painful labor, but as painful as it was worth it. This became apparent to her as she stared at her baby girl's eyes, the same shade as her father. Their little girl inherited Minato's blonde hair as well, but other than that, she looked painfully like her. Kushina just hoped that her daughter wouldn't inherit her trait of ending with a verbal tic. A part of her was worried. Not for herself but for the future of their daughter. It would be a matter of minutes before Minato would come to take their child to seal her. There were also another reason why she was worried. It was the fact that their daughter is a descendant of Zeus and Aphrodite. Kushina grimaced. There was no doubt that she loved her mother, but even she will admit that her mother was a bit too much. Oh, she can only imagine what her mother would do when she sees her youngest grandchild. No doubt, she will spoil the child. Oh, why isn't she cute? I have such a cute granddaughter. Kushina groaned as she shook her head at her mother, looking quite weary and tired as well as suspicious. It was never a good thing when her mother visits, and she knew this from experience. The last time her mother had visited was when she was getting married to Minato. Her mother had caused Jiraiya to act even more of a pervert, and the damned woman had encouraged it. She wouldn't be surprised if Jiraiya wrote perverted books because of her. Did she also mention that she had caused so many heads to turn? Thank goodness Minato hadn't turned his head, or else she would have beaten him up. She never did understand the reason why her mother decided of all times to look like an older version of her. There was no one here that was able to see her anyways unless Minato came, but he was a half-blood like her. Yes, Kushina said, giving a smile at the sleeping child in her hand. I named her Elysia. She looks more like Minato, don't you think? Aphrodite nodded, smiling sadly at the young child in her daughter's hands. They both knew that she wasn't here to have a family visit. Must you seal the Kyuubi in her? You know as well as I do that she won't have a happy life if you do this? The red-haired woman shook her head, having a very bitter smile on her beautiful face. She told Minato about this, but he was still insistent that they do this. The very least Kushina had wanted for the little girl to have a peaceful life and not know about whom she was related to. I informed Minato about this, yet he says that there is no other way, she admits, looking down at her sleeping daughter with great sadness and pity. I never wanted that type of life for her. The very least that she deserved was a normal life for shinobi. The goddess of love giggled at her daughter's words and pointed out, you know the chances of her having a normal life was zero, considering Minato is a Hokage and well, Zeus and I being her grandparents. Kushina noticed the hesitant look in her mother's eyes and accused, you are hiding something from me, aren't you, mother? Mother, geez, you are like your father. Aphrodite muttered, not noticing the wince from her daughter. I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but you must know that Minato's power is now considered as a Kekkei Genkai. If only she hadn't made that stupid bet with Zeus, then she wouldn't have been the one to inform her of this. After this, she was going to have a long rant at Zeus about making her be the bearer of bad news. How is it even possible for Zeus to be afraid to inform his own daughter-in-law that your child has a Kekkei Genkai, or be scared to admit that his granddaughter would also be in danger because of said Kekkei Genkai? Then again, her daughter was quite frightening when she wishes to be. Kushina blinked her eyes at her mother, trying to comprehend the idea of what her mother had just said. After comprehending the idea, she started to go into denial. No, it was pretty rare for this to happen, so why their kid? Why couldn't it be someone else? Oh, when she sees her husband in the afterlife, she was going to beat him to a pulp. You're telling me that my daughter has aerokinesis and electrokinesis? Kushina yelled. Aphrodite nodded and said, I shouldn't mention that she inherited your charm speaking. The red-haired woman slumped against her pillow, staring at the sleeping child in her arms. Elysia was young yet already had so much potential with her power. If she had known about this, then she would have created some scrolls for the child, but they didn't know. They had thought of the chances, but they had ignored the chances. This child of theirs will be in even more trouble. Will she ever be happy? Aphrodite rubbed her chin, wondering whether to tell her the truth or not. It was already been done, but does she tell her daughter what she knew, or shall she lie to her? She didn't want Kushina to think that her daughter would not live a happy life, when in actual fact, she will live a very happy life. She was quite lucky that she was able to convince Apollo to tell her the future of her grandchild. I am not going to lie to you, Kushina darling, but in the beginning she will have a hard life, but then she will meet her soulmate at the age of 12. Aphrodite sighed wistfully as she thought about her granddaughter's love life. Their love will have so many obstacles, just the way I like. Kushina was angry at her mother. No, furious was a better word to describe it. Does her mother not realize what she had said? Her daughter was going to have a hard life, and all her mother thought about was Elysia's love life. Why was she born to such a ditzy mother? And what the hell did her father see in her mother? These questions will never be answered. However, she does need to scold her mother about the soulmate. Soulmate? Ka-chan. She is too young to meet her soulmate, no even date at such a young age. Aphrodite puffed her cheeks at her daughter's words. Must her daughter act so much like her father? During the last days of her ex-lover's life, she had informed him the same thing, and he too got angry. Well, to be fair, he had already been too protective of Kushina. She had no doubt that her ex-lover would have beaten up Minato if he had met him. 12 isn't too young. There have been kids younger than 12, who have declared that they would marry the person that they like. Aphrodite said, smiling at her daughter. She then frowned and crossed her arms at her daughter. Be glad that her soulmate isn't an Uchiha. The red-haired woman furrowed her eyebrows at her mother and asked, why should I be glad? Aphrodite gave Kushina a tight smile and answer, I can't go to specifics, Kushina dear, but I can tell you that Elysia will get hurt by one of them. Kushina looked down at her sleeping daughter and then to her mother, who was looking at Elysia with a loving look. There was no way that she can ask this from her mother, but she needed to do this. If not for her sake, then for Elysia's sake, as she knew that she was slowly dying from the extraction of the Kyuubi. I have a final request to ask of you, Ka-chan. Kushina said as she looked at the little girl in her hands. She closed her eyes when she saw the bright blue eyes of her daughter, who was now crying. It was almost like she knew that she was going to die too. What is your request, Kushina my darling? Aphrodite asked, looking at her daughter with concern. The red-haired woman gave her mother a small bitter smile and answered, my request is that you will keep an eye out for Elysia. I want you to help her in any way possible with any occupation that she chooses to go. She looked down at the little girl and chuckled. Through I have no doubts that she will become a ninja, as she has me and Minato as her parents. The goddess of love looked at her daughter in shock and stuttered, don't you trust these villagers like your husband? Don't you think that they will treat her good? Ka-chan, you know better than anyone about the life of a Jinchuriki. You know as well as I do that they will shun her and will do anything to stunt her growth as a ninja. Aphrodite looked at the crying baby in her daughter's arms. Elysia truly had so much potential, not because of whom she had as her parents, and definitely not because of the powers that she have. No, it is because she is young that she has so much potential. The girl can be a general, a commander, maybe even Hokage, because there were so many possibilities for the girl. It also didn't help that Zeus will be furious if he learns that his only granddaughter can't protect herself because of these villagers. Still, can she do as her daughter asks and keep an eye out on her granddaughter? Or does she turn a blind eye on her granddaughter? However, if the girl does not learn how to control these abilities of hers, then it would cause certain doom. Aphrodite can practically hear Hades complaining to her about how many deaths was caused because Elysia can't control her ability. I will do as you request, but Kushina gave her a smile that told her everything. I know, Ka-chan, that you will do your hardest to help her, Kushina reassured her mother. The goddess of love smiled lovingly at her daughter and gave a gentle kiss on the forehead of her granddaughter's forehead. You're one of a kind, Elysia-chan, Aphrodite whispered to her sleeping granddaughter. She couldn't help but smile in bitterness as she left her daughter and her child to their fate. The only thing that she can do now was watch them from up in the clouds. She knew that she can't interfere in mortal affairs even if it was truly tempting to. It isn't fair, Aphrodite thought, looking down at the ninjas that were giving their lives to the Kyuubi. Elysia deserved to have parents that showered her with affection and teach her everything about her heritage. She truly didn't deserve to have these villagers that will hate her with all their heart, hate her for a reason that she couldn't control. What did the little girl do to deserve this life? Aphrodite asked herself, staring at the night sky in anger and contempt. She didn't do anything. The girl truly deserved to live a life filled with happiness and joy. The goddess of love smiled bitterly as she watches Minato arrive on top of one of his toad summons. Does he realize what he is doing to his daughter? Of course not. He didn't know that he had just basically ruined his daughter's life. Why would he trust these foolish mortals? Does he not know what lies in the heart of these mortals? No, of course not. Only she and the other gods know what goes through a mortal's heart. She closed her eyes when she saw the blinding light that was Hades. It was now all over. Her granddaughter was now all alone in this world and there was nothing that she can do about it. The best thing that she can do is to give her grandchild scrolls telling her of her heritage and how to control her abilities. I will do my best, Kushina, to make sure that your child will grow up to her full potential. Aphrodite said, looking at the sight of the third Hokage carrying her grandchild. She has to make sure that her grandchild reaches her full potential or else her daughter would never forgive her. A.N. I wish to thank everyone that has added me in their follows and favorites. I also wish to thank Engineer Forever for helping me with the rewrite. The next few chapters will be about Elysia's childhood. So please review and tell us about what you think of this rewritten of Survivor. Chapter 2 Disclaimer. I do not own Naruto or the Percy Jackson series. Please support the official release. 6 years ago, her daughter and her husband had died to protect this village from the Kyuubi, but that wasn't all. Her granddaughter had been born. Kushina had asked her to look after the little girl, but only now did Aphrodite decided to check up on the girl. She would have done it earlier, but there had been many things on her plate, including her newly born daughter Lucy. However, it was no excuse for her not to visit her granddaughter. Chiron knew about her granddaughter, including the fact that Elysia is the grandchild of Zeus as well as the fact that she inherited both of her parents' abilities. He had informed her and Zeus that the child is welcome to stay in camp. Aphrodite was truly grateful for the centaur for saying this, but she wasn't going to allow the girl to go to Camp Half-Blood until she was perhaps 7 or 8. There was a difference between being young and too young to be trained if you were to ask her. She scanned her eyes through the playground, trying to search for the little girl that was her granddaughter, and she frowned. Surely, her grandchild would be playing in the playground, playing games with the other kids. She suddenly spotted a sad little girl on the swings. The little girl was staring at the other kids with longing. Her throat became dry as she realized that the young girl was her granddaughter. It was painfully obvious to her that Elysia was incredibly lonely. It hurts her immortal heart to see the girl look so sad and lonely. It was especially hard now when the little girl stares at the other kids. With longing, she stares at the parents, who were not bothering to hide their glare from the child. Aphrodite gritted her teeth at them. Do these villagers have no shame? It was obvious to her the reason of her grandchild's loneliness. It was one thing to shun the girl for something that she can't control, but it was an entirely different thing to make their kids not to play with the little girl. Your mother never wanted you to have this type of life, Elysia. Aphrodite thought as she stared at the young girl. She knew better than anyone about the life of a Jinchuriki. Each one of them knew about pain and loneliness, but rarely did they ever found love. It wasn't even her fault because she would often try her hardest to help them, but these blasted mortals were narrow-minded. Kushina was one of the lucky few that found love. Staring at the young girl, Aphrodite made her decision about the young girl. There was no way in Hades that she would allow the girl to feel so much loneliness, and none of these idiotic villagers were going to be the girl's friend, so the only thing to do is for her to befriend the girl. This will also allow her to talk to the girl about her parents, indirectly of course, The girl wasn't ready to know about her parents just yet. She will tell the girl about her heritage, but it will be at the same time she goes to camp. "Hello there," Aphrodite said to the young girl. The young girl turned her head to look at her. Aphrodite was flooded with a barrel of emotions as she stared at the young girl's eyes. Elysia truly had her father's eyes, but the shape of her eyes was definitely that of her mother. She knew it was going to be hard to talk to the girl, but she hadn't realized just how hard it would be. She wanted to leave Elysia alone because of how painful it was, but she couldn't. Her daughter would have been disappointed in her, and Aphrodite couldn't stand the thought of her daughter being angry and disappointed that her own mother can't even look at her grandchild without being sad. Aphrodite sucked in her breath and reminds herself that Kushina had asked her to look after the child, and she wanted to face her daughter without feeling guilty. But it was so hard. "Are you talking to me, miss?" Elysia asked, blinking her eyes at her. There were a lot of emotions in the girl's eyes, particularly hope and pain. Aphrodite's eyes softened at this, and for the second time that day, her heart broke. Her granddaughter was so young, and already she felt loneliness. Aphrodite never did understand the reason for Minato and Kushina's decision of staying in this world. The people in the other world were truly smarter and more open-minded compared to the people here. This was one of the reasons why she was considering in sending the girl to Camp Half-Blood. None of the kids would judge her, and if they learn of the Kyuubi, they won't think anything about it. She knew this because none of her daughter's friends judge her. "Why won't I talk to you, silly?" The young girl flushed red in embarrassment and shuffled her feet together, looking quite hesitant to answer. Aphrodite was eerily reminded of a young Minato as she did this. "People don't usually talk to me. I don't know why, but that's the way it is," she said bitterly. "I don't know why they hate me or what I did to deserve it." The goddess of love pursed her lips and took a seat on the other empty swing, musing over what Elysia had just confirmed. These adults were a bunch of idiots that can't look past their own pain to see that a young girl was also suffering. "Mind telling me what you wish for the future, Elysia?" Aphrodite asked, trying to change the subject from the gloomy topic. The blonde-haired girl looked at her in surprise, but the surprise was soon replaced with one of suspicion. It broke her heart even more as she realized just how messed up her young granddaughter's life is. "I never told you my name, lady," Elysia said, narrowing her eyes at her, "and I am certain that I have never met you in my life." "I heard plenty of things about you." The blonde-haired girl nodded and rubbed the back of her neck, realizing how the pretty lady knew about her. Elysia knew that her pranks were quite infamous, but she hadn't realized that it had reached to that level of infamous. "If you heard about me from the pranks that I did, then I should inform you that the people I have did it on deserve it." Aphrodite grinned at the girl's words and ruffled her hair, surprising the little girl. The blonde grinned at her, causing the goddess to smile as well. Her granddaughter can still smile, that much was important, but Aphrodite wished that she could see the pranks that girl did. Was it anything like her mother's prank? Or was it even worse? It was quite a delight to know that her only grandchild had inherited her mother's love of pranks. Aphrodite knew that if she ever told Hermes about her grandchild, then he would have begged her to save the girl, reasoning that she was her grandchild, when in actual fact, the reason being that pranksters stick together. It was never a secret between them that he loved her daughter's pranks. "Elysia, tell me, what is your dream?" Aphrodite asked, returning back to the topic at hand. The blonde-haired girl looked down at her hands and then to the woman, hesitating before nodding her head at herself. Aphrodite was reminded of Kushina and her ex-lover when she did this. The pair of them did this when they were debating with each other. The goddess of love was now starting to think that it was in the genes. "Before I answer your question, can you tell me why you are talking to me?" Aphrodite blinked her eyes at the girl and shook her head while frowning at her. Elysia was really young, and yet she can use charm speaking, but this one seemed to be an unconscious intention instead of her consciously does it. Most of her children or descendant unlock this ability when they are a little bit older, but Elysia here did it now. This was really spelling trouble. Aphrodite knew that it would be trouble if her grandchild doesn't learn to control her own abilities. There was that quote from a movie that said that with great powers comes great responsibility, which was really true in the case of Elysia. It seems like she would need to take her grandchild to Camp Half-Blood earlier than expected. "Is there a law that says that I can't speak to you?" Aphrodite asked. The girl shook her head and the goddess smiled. "There's your answer. Now tell me, what is your dream?" Elysia had seemed to be surprised that she didn't answer her question, and the goddess of love realized that the girl had been doing it for some time. How long since Elysia realized that she had this gift? The better question yet is, what have she used it for? The most logical answer is that she had been using it for food. "I wish to become a strong kunoichi," Elysia answered softly as she looked down at her swinging feet, "but I don't know if I will become a good one." Aphrodite smiled at her and said, "I have no doubts that you will accomplish your dream of becoming a strong kunoichi. I think that you will be one of the best kunoichi that everyone will see." Elysia was taken back by her declaration, and Aphrodite wondered how many people had given her grandchild the encouragement that she needed. These villagers were going to Tartarus if she had a say. All she needed to do was bring Hades here and show them what they were doing to her precious little grandchild. She licked her lips at the mere thought of all of them going to hell. "You are still talking to me even through the adults don't like me?" Elysia suddenly asked. The goddess of love smiled and answered, "Elysia-chan, you shouldn't care about what petty people think of you, and do you want to know why?" Elysia hesitated and nodded her head. There was something about this pretty lady that was oddly familiar. Maybe it has to do with her eyes, or maybe it is her voice. But whatever it is, the woman seemed to be oddly familiar to her, and a part of her knew that she could trust her. Trust? She doesn't truly trust anyone, not even the Hokage, who she had known all of her young life, yet this lady made it easy to trust her. Not only that, but the young woman was giving her looks of an unfamiliar emotion, but the only thing that was certain was that the woman gave an emotion that is opposite of hate. It just felt so nice, in her opinion, not to be seen with hate. "You know, despite the fact that we just met, I already think of you as someone very precious to me," Aphrodite said to the young girl. The goddess of love smiled at the surprised look on her granddaughter's face before glaring at the adults, who were whispering behind their back, "These mortals have no shame, do they? Oh, how she longs to bring her grandchild with her, but she knew of her the girl's future, and unfortunately her fate laid here. But this didn't mean that she couldn't make her granddaughter a strong kunoichi with the help of Zeus, of course." "Since you're talking to me, does that make you my friend?" Elysia asked, looking at the woman with hopeful eyes. Aphrodite gulped at the hopeful look on the girl's face. Elysia wasn't the first Jinchuriki to feel this much loneliness, and she always felt pity and sadness for them, but this time it was very different. Elysia was her grandchild, and no grandparent wished to see their grandchild in so much pain. She will definitely need to have a talk with Hades about allowing her to punish Minato. The man may have died a hero, but his only daughter was in so much pain because of what he have done to her. "Yes, Elysia-chan. I am a friend." The smile that Elysia gave her was one that warmed her heart. The smile just reminded her that a part of her daughter still lived inside the girl. Aphrodite itched to snap her finger and make a camera appear, wanting to capture the sight in front of her. She wanted to give the picture to Zeus and see his reaction towards the girl. She knew that Elysia would have him wrapped around her little pinky. It wasn't stated or shown, but all the gods knew that Zeus had loved his son so much that he had wanted to be there for Elysia's birth. Hera, who was still pissed that her husband broke the pact, had stopped the poor god. After learning about his son's death, everything changed. He became distant from everyone, but would still ask her from time to time about the young girl. Zeus still cared for the girl, that much was certain, and she knew that he cared for the young girl. The only reason why he hadn't visited her was because it would be painful to look at the young girl. One day, she will have to force him to go visit the young girl, even if it is painful for him to look at the young girl. The young girl was his grandchild and deserves to know about her grandfather as well as have some affection from him. The young girl needed all the love that she can get from her grandparents. Unlike Kushina, whose secret was kept safe, Elysia was going through so much pain, and it was all thanks to Minato, who thought that it would be a good idea to inform everyone that his daughter was a Jinchuriki. Honestly, what was that man thinking? No, what was the Hokage thinking when he announced it to them? They weren't thinking that was the problem. Lady, why do you look so angry? I was thinking of a man that I truly wish to beat up. Elysia blinked her eyes and said, "You're one weird lady." Aphrodite laughed at the young girl's honesty. There was no doubt in her mind that Elysia deserved all the happiness and love that she can get, not because she was lonely and a Jinchuriki, but because she was her grandchild. This granddaughter of hers must know the true meaning of love, and Aphrodite will teach her to her. She will do it even if it was the last thing she has to do. I wish to thank everyone that reviewed the last chapter and added this to their favorites and follows, and I also wish to thank Engineer Forever for baiting this story. I do hope that everyone have enjoyed this chapter, and I wish to hear everyone's thoughts about it, especially on Elysia and Aphrodite's behavior. Chapter 3 Disclaimer: I do not own Naruto or the Percy Jackson series. Please support the official release. Co-written by Engineer Forever. Elysia knew she was different. She could do things that she couldn't really explain, things that most kids her age could only wish to do. A prime example is whenever she asks someone to give her something, they will do it, and then a couple of hours later, they will be angry with her and accuse of her theft when they actually gave her it. It wasn't normal. Elysia knew that much was certain because she had never seen it happen to anyone else. Another example was that she was able to see lines that seemed to be invisible to most people. 1. It was a pretty nifty thing to see, but Elysia didn't understand the reason why she could see them. However, she honestly didn't mind. It just meant that she was special, and it gave her more of an opportunity to survive. Elysia couldn't control these abilities. No matter how hard she tries, it just seemed impossible to control it. She wanted to ask the Hokage if it was a Kekkei Genkei, but a part of her told her that she shouldn't, and another part of her still doesn't trust the old man. She still hasn't figured the reason why. A few hours ago, Elysia had reached Camp Half-Blood with the help of the pretty lady, who often visited her. She didn't remember how she got there, but she did remember the pretty lady asking her if she wanted to visit a different place. Elysia said yes, and she honestly thought that the lady had been joking. Oh, how wrong she was. Now, she laid on the hospital bed, staring at the intense eyes of the middle-aged man in front of her. She didn't remember why she was in the hospital bed or who this man in front of her. He was staring quite intently at her as if he was trying to see through her soul. She truly hoped that he couldn't see through her soul. "You are quite the child, aren't you?" Elysia blinked her eyes and asked, "Yes, sir?" The man smiled at her, causing her to look at him with distrust. It was wrong of her not to trust the man since he was the one that found her, but she don't trust anyone. It was a rule that she made for herself when she was younger. The middle-aged man stroked his bread as he looked at her. She stared right back at him, waiting for him to start explaining about how she got here. Occasionally, she allowed her eyes to flicker at her surroundings, which would bring a frown upon her face. Where the hell was she? Tell me, child. Do you know where you are? The blonde-haired girl crossed her arms at him and angrily said, "Of course not. There is nothing familiar about this place. Where the hell am I? And who the hell are you? And why am I in the hospital bed?" she said in rapid-fire succession. The middle-aged man blinked his eyes at her before laughing at her. Elysia clenched her hands into a fist, wishing that she could punch the middle-aged man in the nose. However, she didn't. Not because she couldn't, but because she knew that the old man had answers that she needed. She wasn't lying when she said that you can't control your abilities, the middle-aged man said. Elysia frowned and the middle-aged man pursed his lips at her before handing her a glass of water. The blonde hesitantly took the glass of water and then took a sip of water, looking at the man with an expecting look. "Tell me, child, do you realize what you did just now?" The whiskered-faced girl shook her head at him. The man shook his head and rubbed his chin as he looked at her before sighing. He suddenly looked older than he seemed to be. She looked down at her hands and then to the walls around her. It looked very different from the hospital in Konoha. "The first thing you should know, child, is that you are in a different world." Elysia blinked her eyes at him. processing the information that he gave her before throwing her head backwards and laughed. The man had to be kidding her, right? There was no way in hell that she was in a whole different world. It was just bloody impossible. You don't seem to believe me, child. The blonde-haired girl clasped her hands on the bed sheets and said calmly, "You expect me to believe this? I am not an idiot, sir. This can't be a different world. It just can't. You remind me of your parents when you talk like this." The middle-aged man said in amusement, "Your mother and father had said the exact same thing when they first came here." Elysia closed her mouth and looked shocked at that information. This man in front of her knew her parents, the same parents that no one knew. "Yes, you truly do remind me of them," the middle-aged man said, smiling at her. "You look like a female version of your father through you inherited the shape of your face and eye shape from your mother." "Sir, tell me, child, do you realize what you have done just now?" Elysia hesitated before shaking her head vigorously at the man, who frowned at her response. What did she do just now that made the man weary? Surely, it wasn't that awful. Unless, he was talking about these strange abilities of hers, but it must be coincidence. She would notice if she had done it, wouldn't she? Of course she would. "Just now, you were angry that I was laughing at you, were you not? Hi, but what does this have to do about what I have just done?" The middle-aged man smiled at her and simply said, "A few sparks of electricity just flickered across your forehead." Elysia gaped at him and touched her forehead, trying to comprehend at what the middle-aged man had just informed her. She gulped and looked down at her hands. Was she becoming a freak? Is this the reason why no one accepted her in Konoha? Why? She clenched the sheets further in anger. "Calm down, child." The blonde-haired girl glared at the man and opened her mouth to shout at him, when suddenly a boy about a year older by the looks of it appeared. He had his hands behind his head, having a goofy smile on his face as he walked into the room, not seeming to notice the tension between them. The middle-aged man sighed at the young boy and asked wearily, "Jake, why are you here? You know that you are still." "I am fine, Chiron," Jake said cheerfully, "but I wanted to meet the new girl." "New girl?" The boy turned his body to face her and she was taken back by the smile on his face. He seemed to be quite cheerful boy, not seeming to look like he knew what it is like to suffer. His hazel eyes twinkle in mirth as he looked at her, having an innocence that she, herself, doesn't possess. "Well, you are new to camp, aren't you? So this will make you a camp?" she asked, turning her attention to the man that she now knows as Chiron. "What do you mean by camp? And you still haven't explained about this being a different world." The middle-aged man gave a reprimand glare at the boy beside him, who simply gave a sheepish smile as a response. Chiron stroked his beard and sighed, giving the girl a thoughtful look while the boy, Jake, stared at her. "You look weird." Elysia gritted her teeth at the boy and clenched her hands into a fist. "Well, at least I don't have a stupid smile on my face," she yelled at the boy. "And I don't look weird," she said as she brushed her shoulder-length hair out of her eyes. The boy grinned at her and said, "But you do look weird. I mean, what type of girl have a whisker marks? And also, what in Hades are you wearing? I have you know that these whisker marks are my birthmarks. And what is wrong with the way I dress? And who is this Hades?" Elysia asked, gritting her teeth at them. Jake opened his mouth to answer her question, but was slapped by the back of the head by Chiron, who was giving the young boy a glare. Elysia snickered at this and the young boy gave her an angry scowl. "Let me explain to you about our camp," Chiron said, smiling at the young girl, "and about this world, as you will be spending the rest of the summer here." Elysia pursed her lips as she listened attentively as the middle-aged man explained to her about the purpose of this camp. Several times he was interrupted by Jake, who added his own piece of information or made a joke about what Chiron said. By the end of it, the blonde-haired girl was in complete shock at what she had just learned. This camp was for a camp for kids, whose parents were gods. These kids were trained to kill monsters and to fight other half-bloods. Not only that, but she was in an entirely different world where it seemed like being a ninja didn't mean anything. It was just so hard for her to believe. The thing that made it hard to believe was the kid beside her was a half-blood, yet he behaved like any other kid. She curled her mouth into a frown, tapping her finger thoughtfully at the man. Let's just say that I believe you about the different worlds and gods. What does this camp have to do with my parents? Everything. Jake rubbed the back of his neck at this while Elysia simply waited to hear for an explanation. She wanted to yell at him for a response, but found that she didn't have the energy to do so, which was oddly strange. Usually, she was very energetic, able to outrun even Jenin. Yet now she felt oddly tired. Perhaps, it might have to do with the overwhelming information that he had just given her. So, Chiron-san, you said something about my parents. Chiron nodded his head at her, looking quite pained when she mentioned about her parents. She bit her lips while he rubbed the back of his neck as he tried to find the best way to tell her about her parents. It was painfully obvious to people looking in that there was tension between them. Your parents were half-bloods and had came here after each year in the academy. Elysia kept her face blank at this piece of information. She guessed that much when he started explaining about the half-bloods, but a part of her was hoping that her suspicion was wrong. She cast a glance to the windows, surprised to hear the laughter of the other kids. If they were trained to kill monsters, then shouldn't they be somber? Then again, monsters have no right to live. Elysia thought bitterly, remembering some of the awful words that the villagers had called her. Your mother was a daughter of Aphrodite while your father was the son of Zeus, hence your ability with lightning. Wait a second, you mean to tell me that Zeus broke the pact? Twice? Jake asked, looking at the centaur in disbelief. He glanced at the pretty blonde before looking at the middle-aged looking centaur, which looked quite amused at his outburst. You can't exactly blame him for being shocked, right? It isn't every day that you see a descendant of Zeus. Chiron-san, what do you mean by the pact? Chiron sighed at her question, feeling even more tired than ever before. After World War II, your grandfather, Poseidon and Hades made a pact to have any more children with mortals. My grandfather broke the pact, Elysia stated, frowning as she heard the sound of lightning being struck. Your grandfather broke the pact twice, Jake said gleefully. Man, I was actually betting my horses that Poseidon would break the pact more. You're so weird. Chiron chuckled at the two kids, who were now arguing about which one of them was weird. However, he felt very somber. He knew that this young girl had the potential of becoming one of the best, but can he really train her? He could train her on how to use a sword as well as the bow and arrow, maybe even with her powers, but there was one thing that he can't teach her. He couldn't teach her on how to become a ninja. At least, I don't speak like I am someone's grandmother. And what's the deal with the san? You are starting to speak like Hikaru? I will have you know that the san suffix is to be used for respect. Chiron tuned the two of them out, pondering at the reminder of Hikaru. The boy was a ninja, was he not? And if memory serves him correct, didn't the boy also come from the same village as the girl in front of him? By the way, what is your name? Oi, don't change the subject, and for your information, my name is Elysia. The centaur shook his head at the pair of them, however a small frown was on his face. He still hasn't decided about what he is going to do about her ninja training. Aphrodite had given him strict orders to train her to become one of the strongest ninjas that Konoha have ever seen. Perhaps he should ask Hikaru to train the girl in the ninja arts. The boy was the only ninja here and was quite a powerful one, if memory serves him right. Besides, it would do some good for the boy to confront his past about the village that he grew up in, and Elysia might just be able to do it. Jake, I expect you to show Elysia around, and she will stay in your cabin until her grandmother or grandfather claims her. Claim me? Chiron left the two kids alone, knowing that Jake can explain it to the girl better than he can about the claiming system. He turned to look at the young girl for the last time and found a wave of nostalgia as he looked at her. She truly did remind him of her parents. He realizes just how hard it must be for Aphrodite to look at the girl. It would be hard for him to look at the girl, but he will be able to do it as he always does. It wasn't like Elysia was the first descendant that he had trained, but it had been quite some time since he trained them. He had found Hikaru playing volleyball with his siblings. Chiron couldn't help but find the irony of the situation. Hikaru left Konoha since he found no use for the village. But now Elysia was here, a child from Konoha, and he was asking him to train the girl. Will the boy do as he asks? Not even Chiron knows. There wasn't much known about the boy's past, as the boy would often make jokes when speaking about his family. He would understand if the boy said no, but he would be disappointed in the boy because he was allowing his feelings towards his family to cloud his judgment. Chiron, one of the sons of Apollo, yelled, noticing that he was standing over there. Everyone stopped playing and bowed. Chiron waved his hand at their bows and turned his attention to the boy in the middle. He had spiky black hair and blue eyes, was grinning and laughing at what one of his brother jokes. Hikaru, I wish to speak to you. Oh, Hikaru is in trouble now. The boy, Hikaru, rolled his eyes at his siblings' teasing, but a smile can be seen on his face. The boy put his hands into his pockets as he walked towards Chiron, grinning at the centaur in front of him, who was shaking his head at the children in front of him. He waited till Hikaru was in front of him before taking the boy for a walk. Chiron knew that he needed to relax the boy before speaking to him about training young Elysia, who was already showing that she can't really control her own ability. You wish to speak to me, Chiron-sensei? Hikaru said, putting his hands behind his head, smiling lazily at the centaur. I have a request to ask of you. The son of Apollo blinked his eyes at this piece of information and asked, what type of request do you wish to ask of me? Chiron took breath and answered, I wish for you to train a young girl that recently came here. Her name is Elysia and she needs all the help that she can. Elysia? Hikaru asked in wonder about where he heard that name before. Yes, her name is Elysia and she comes from your village Konoha. Did you know that my ancestor had the hots for the Shoden? Hokage? Hikaru suddenly asked. Chiron crossed his arms at the boy, looking quite unimpressed at what the boy was trying to pull. He knew the boy for 1 year and he knows that him trying to make a joke about this means that he was trying to change the subject, but he wasn't going to allow the boy to do this. Hikaru needed to confront his past. Hikaru, I know that you have no use for Konoha, but this girl needs to be trained. You know, Chiron-sensei, that I don't take students nor am I the teaching type. Hikaru said with a strained voice. I am very laid-back type of person and this Elysia needs someone that isn't that laid back. She needs someone that can understand her, but that isn't the only important thing. This girl needs all the help that she can get in that department. Hikaru put on an impassive mask and said calmly, I stopped becoming a ninja the moment I ran away from the Uchiha clan, on the day that I ran from the village. I don't want anything to do with ninjas, they're very narrow-minded people. Hikaru, if I teach the girl then I can promise you that I won't go easy on her. Hikaru said, putting his hands up, I'm going to teach the girl, don't you worry, I am very different from my clan. I don't want you to go easy in her training, Hikaru. Chiron said, Elysia need all the help that she can get. Lady Aphrodite has ordered me to train the girl into becoming a capable kunoichi by the time she becomes 12. Hikaru found his lips curling into a small frown at this piece of information. He may be living in this world for the past year, so he has learned the most important lesson about being a part of this world. Never use chakra on thugs or else it makes them insane. Second important thing was never piss a girl and never go shopping with them. However, the most important rule for a half-blood besides always carry a weapon, and that was never ever piss off a god. Elysia, I can't believe that I am going to teach the Kyuubi Jinchuriki. Hikaru said, chuckling to himself as he finally remembered where he heard that name before in Konoha. If my dear lovely Oji-sama knew about this, then he would personally try to kill me. I guess I can't be lazy if I teach her, can I? You know about the girl being a, of course I know. I was there when it was announced to the whole village. Hikaru said, running his hand through his hair, anyone who was genin and above during that time knew. I was a genin at the time, Chiron-sensei. Through I was a very reckless one. Chiron chuckled at that. Anyways, The Hokage announced it to us that the Kyuubi had been defeated by the Yondaime and was sealed inside a girl. Hikaru said softly. I don't really remember who it was, but some idiot said, "Let us kill the Kyuubi." He also said something about the girl being a monster. Poor girl. Hikaru nodded his head and continued, poor girl is right, however I'm warning you Kirin-sensei that it isn't a good idea for me to train her. You feel guilt. Kirin said softly, noticing the conflicting emotion in the boy's blue eyes. The son of Apollo didn't answer, instead gave a huge smile. So, Kirin-sensei, have you seen where Kayla is? Kirin chuckled at the boy and teased, are you planning to ask her out on a date? And I thought the pair of you were already going out. Hikaru's face turned red at what the centaur had said, gritting his teeth at the centaur before yelling, I am not asking her out. You, Arrow Centaur, and I am not going out with Kayla. The centaur smiled at this, shaking his head at the boy and said, right, I will inform Elysia about this arrangement once she makes herself comfortable in the Hermes cabin. Kirin-sensei, does she know about? No, Kirin said sharply, don't inform the girl until I think she is ready to know. Kirin-sensei, the girl deserves to know. She needs to know the reason why she is being treated badly over there, Hikaru said. Calmly, it would make her life a lot more easier if she knew. It will destroy the girl. Kirin, she deserves to know the truth. If it was me, then I would definitely want to know the reason why, Hikaru argued. She may be 7 years old, but tell me, does she act like a normal 7-year-old to you? Kirin shook his head, looking quite weary as he remembers the girl's behavior in the infirmary. The girl truly didn't act like a normal 7-year-old, acting quite older than you would expect from a girl her age. He stroked his beard and looked at Hikaru, who was now interested in looking at some trees. He sighed and nodded his head. Hikaru didn't act like a normal 15-year-old boy, the boy often tries to, but it was still a work in progress. Honestly, he had never seen a 15-year-old boy with so much politeness like the boy in front of him. The boy made an interesting point about the girl's behavior. You shouldn't tell the girl just yet, allow her to live in ignorance just for a little while longer. Kirin said, the very least allow her to act like any other kid in this camp before we inform her of this. Hikaru nodded his head at this. I'll agree you on that much, he said. I may not know the girl, but I agree with you to allow her to act like the other kids. We still need to inform her about this soon. Kirin-sensei. I know. The son of Apollo watched in silence as the centaur left before climbing on the tree, kicking the shoes, which his brother brought for him, on the ground. He leaned his head on the bark of the tree and clenched his hands into a fist, trying his best to control the raging emotions running through him. He licked his cracked lips and pulled out a picture of him and his little half-sister, Rosie, sighing at it. It was only morning, yet it already felt like a long day for him. I am going to have so much fun torturing that girl, Hikaru said lazily, closing his eyes to take a short nap. Oh, he can practically hear the girls complaining about his training methods. So, Elysia, where are you from? Elysia looked at the older boy, pursuing her lips at him, and asked, didn't you hear about me coming from a different world? Jake grinned at her and said, I forgot about that. I come from Konoha, which is in different world, Elysia said calmly, trying to rein in her temper. The son of Hermes tilted his head at this piece of information before grinning at her. So you're like Hikaru then? He asked excitably. You're one of those ninjas that can climb on walls without using your hands? Make strategies that not many people can think of? Also do rare things like spitting fire out of your mouth? I am not a ninja, Elysia said, kicking a stone on the dirt path, though I am training to become a kunoichi and I can't really do those type of things. What? Why not? Jake asked, tilting his head at her. Don't all ninjas do that? So why can't you do it? Because the stupid academy teachers don't want to teach us higher level jutsu as they believe that we don't have that much chakra or something like that, Elysia answered bitterly. That sucks. Elysia nodded her head in agreement, putting her hands behind her head and looked at the boy, taking the time to analyze the boy's appearance. The boy, in the words of her idiotic classmate Ino and Sakura, Quite cute, that much no one could deny, not with his messy brown hair and hazel eyes that held mirth. She frowned and notices a scar on the boy's hand. How did you get that scar? I hit something pointy, the boy answered cheerfully. The blonde was taken back by his answer, not sure whether the boy was lying or not. He must be telling the truth, Elysia decided, or why else would he be this cheerful? It just doesn't make sense if a person lies for them to be cheerful. Hesitant, she could understand, but if they were cheerful then she can't understand them at all. So, what is your life like in Konoha? Is it cheerful? And what is the village like? Jake asked, grinning at her. Hikaru never speaks about it for some strange reason. The blonde closed her eyes and said calmly, I don't want to talk about my village, Jake-san. Why not? They hurt you, didn't they? Jake said, looking suddenly serious. Those villagers, I mean, they did something awful to you, didn't they? No, Elysia said, smiling at him. I may have just met you, but your skill at the art of lying sucks if I do say so myself. Jake said, grinning at her, and I am an expert in everything to do with lying and fake smiles. Elysia found her eyebrows twitching at his comment about her lying skills. Her lying skills were not bad and are in fact quite good if she dare say so herself. After all, even the Hokage believed her lies about her being fine. Besides, do you even know how to lie, princess? Jake said. He couldn't help but find the humor about the girl being the granddaughter of Zeus. That's it. No more Miss Nice Girl. Without warning, a lightning bolt shot out of her forehead and it was heading towards him. Immediately the boy started running away from the irritated girl, who seemed quite determined to beat the boy into a pulp or shock him into charcoal. The people around them were gawking at the young kids, trying to comprehend at what they had just seen. They didn't just see a little girl. Did that little girl just? No, it must be their imagination. Those were the thoughts of everyone as they watched the young boy run away from the girl. Get back here, you insolent idiot. You'll never catch me alive. They chase each other around until they reached the hill, where the huge tree stood. Elysia stopped running and looked at the tree, feeling curious about why it was there. What type of tree was that? Hey, Jake, what type of tree is that? Jake didn't answer. Elysia turned around and saw Jake standing in front of a bull, which had smoke coming out of its nostrils. There were other half-bloods along with him, who were also being attacked by the same bulls that also had smoke coming out of its nostrils. Smoke, Elysia, I think it is best that you run now, and why should I? You haven't been trained yet on how to deal with monsters like this. Elysia opened her mouth to protest but found that she couldn't as Jake was currently running away from the bull, who had just only realized that there was a half-blood in front of him. Run, you idiot, Jake hissed as he ran away from the mechanic bull. Elysia was pissed. No one calls her an idiot and lives without getting beaten up. Elysia didn't know how she did it, but in a fit of rage, she summoned a lightning bolt from the sky, which electrocuted the bull, missing her intended target. Damn it! What the hell was wrong with her aim these days? At least that idiot was safe, for now. She suddenly noticed that all the half-bloods were staring at her, looking shocked that she had done something like that. She smiled sheepishly at them and noticed that there was a blonde-haired girl with gray eyes, looking at her with weariness, and was that befuddlement that she was seeing? The boy beside her looked also surprised. Elysia, princess, I think I am starting to like you, and have I told you that you look cute? You're still going to get beat up. Jake smiled nervously at her and opened his mouth to protest but stopped when he noticed the lightning sparks coming out of her forehead. He gulped and started to run away from the girl. Today, he learned an important lesson. If you want to tease Elysia, call her princess but run away after you said it, or else she will try to kill you by using a lightning bolt coming out of her forehead. Aphrodite curled her lips into an amused smile as she watched her granddaughter chasing the son of Hermes. The little girl truly didn't know how to control her abilities, but that would come in time soon, and hopefully, the girl will not be very violent. Hopefully. Oh, who was she kidding? Elysia was acting like her mother when she was fighting with Jake. Kushina, she felt like curling into a ball and cry. You all right, Aphrodite? Hermes asked, looking at her with concern. Aphrodite sniffled and looked at the god, curious to know when he arrived, but thought better of it. She clenched her hands into a fist and gestured for the god of thieves to look at the special mirror that she had, which allows her to watch her children and descendants. Hermes frowned and looked at the mirror, finding his lips curled into a smile as he watched his son, Jake, being chased after by a blonde-haired girl, who looked remarkably like Minato and Kushina. He blinked his eyes at the sight of the lightning coming out of her forehead. Aphrodite, is that? Yes, that lucky bastard. Oops. Hermes turned around and saw Aphrodite picking up her mirror, looking at him thoughtfully. He gulped in fear, realizing that he shouldn't have said anything about Minato. Slowly, he started to inch away from the woman, ready to escape towards the door. You are fast, Hermes, but I am faster in getting that door locked. Shit. He was one dead god. One, due to her electrokinesis, Elysia is able to sense electric, magnetic, and electromagnetic phenomena. She is, however, able to follow the electric and magnetic field lines using her eyes. I want to thank everyone that reviewed the last chapter and added this to their favorites. I also want to thank Engineer Forever for helping with the rewrite. Hey guys, E4E here. I just want to say to those who know who Elysia's powers emulate, keep it on the down low for now, cause it is just going to keep getting better. Chapter 4 Disclaimer. I do not own Naruto or the Percy Jackson series. Please support the official release. Co-written by Engineer Forever. Hikaru had never loved his clan. They were arrogant in their ways and were prejudiced about people that they never really met, and were even prejudiced to their own clan members. He should know, since he was one of the few people that they discriminate. It was truly ironic. He was born to the head of the clan's sister and was raised by said head of the clan when his mother had died. You would think that he would be treated like royalty in the clan, but he wasn't. He was treated the exact opposite because his uncle hated him. No, his uncle didn't hate him. He despises him. It was never said between them, but his uncle had wished that he had been born to one of the males in the family instead of some foreigner. Hell, his uncle never thought that he could even inherit the Sharingan because of his father. People with different color eyes shouldn't be able to do it. His uncle had once said to him when he had been 6 years old. That was the first time Hikaru ever felt so much anger to his uncle. It was because of his uncle that he was considered as an outcast. No one in the clan liked him because his uncle had declared to them that he was not a proper Uchiha. What the hell was a proper Uchiha to him? That blasted uncle of his had integrated in his mind about all the proper behavior of how an Uchiha must act. Always be polite, respect those stronger than you. The Sharingan was the best Kekai Genkai, and other stupid things. Never show any emotions, and above all else, family comes before the village. Those weren't actually bad rules, but the thing that made him feel disgusted was how they looked down at the common ninja. This was one of the many reasons for why he hated his clan, and he could write a whole book about it. Not that he would. It would just be a waste of energy and memory. He would like to forget those past experience with that horrible family of his. If he were given the chance to prank them without getting into trouble, then he would have done it a long time ago. Sadly, there was a lot of things that he wished that he could have done, and one of them was to spite on his family. Perhaps this was why he wanted to help the girl in front of him. If his uncle had ever learns that he was teaching the Kyuubi Jinchuriki, then he might have had him officially disinherited from the Uchiha clan. But if what he saw in a vision was true, there wasn't much of an Uchiha clan left. And he took a strange amount of pleasure in that. Hikaru chuckled at his thoughts before looking at the young girl with a thoughtful look. She looked calm, but Hikaru had experience with facial expression, and Elysia here was no different from the other people that had been an outcast. She was nervous, that much he was certain from the quivering lips on her face. My name is Hikaru, he said, giving the young girl a smile. I presume you know why Chiron sent you to me. He said that you're going to train me into becoming a kunoichi, am I right? Hikaru nodded and looked at the young girl carefully, taking the time to analyze the girl. Quite thin if her hands indicate, but that would change with his training and the food that the camp provides. He rubbed his chin, thinking about what type of training that he would give the girl. I'm not only going to teach you how to become a shinobi, but I am also going to teach you about controlling that ability of yours. Hikaru said, gesturing for the girl to take a seat on the forest ground. I'm not going to lie to you, kid, but I'm not going to take it easy on you just because of your age. Why? Because by the time I was your— No, I mean, why did you agree to train me? If you are from Konoha, then don't you hate me? Elysia asked, tilting her head at him. Hikaru pursed his lips at her. The girl was young, but she knew what it is like to be hated for something you can't control. Well, sadly, she doesn't know about the Kyuubi in her. He flickered his blue eyes at her and said, I never exactly met you, but I heard things from my annoying cousin about you. Annoying cousin? Do I know him? Hikaru snorted and said in amusement, how can you not know him? When I still lived in Konoha, the girls your age and above would stand outside the clan compound and beg to be let in. All the girls squeal over him and say, date me, and other nonsense. Poor brat, he has to deal what every Uchiha male goes through. Uchiha, Elysia said, eyes widening at him. You mean to tell me that you are related to those bastards? The son of Apollo found his lips twitching at her words, and Elysia's eyes widened when she saw the boy laughed out loud. This was the first time she had heard an Uchiha laugh. You know, I am starting to like you, kid. No one has ever insulted the Uchiha clan except me. Hikaru said, grinning lazily at her. I think you and I are going to get along just fine. Elysia grinned and opened her mouth to say even more insults about the clan, to be more specific on Sasuke, but stopped when she saw the creepy smile on the boy's face. I believe now is the time for me to start your training? Hikaru nodded and said, yes, training. Your first training exercise is for you to do 200 laps around the whole of Camp Half Blood. Elysia gawked at him and opened her mouth to protest about the insanity of the training, but gulped at the sight of the kunai in the boy's hand. He wasn't going to harm her, was he? The glint in his eyes were starting to make her question whether she was sane in deciding to become a shinobi. To make it even more fun, I am going to throw this kunai if you stop running, just to keep your motivation up, Hikaru said cheerfully. Her face turned pale at this. Now, you only have 3 seconds before I start throwing these beautifully made kunai at you. Elysia chuckled, thinking that the boy wouldn't actually try to do some harm to her. There should be laws about harming kids in the camp? Isn't there? The mad glint in the boy's eyes was seriously making her question that last thought about them having laws of harming people. Hikaru grinned when he saw the frightened look on the girl's face. It had been so long since he had seen fear in a student's face. The only person that has the same fear is his half-brother Lee, and that was for waking him up earlier than usual. 1. Hikaru wanted to drag the fear even longer. 2. He took out a kunai and the girl's eyes widened in fear. The girl immediately took off before he could even finish uttering the number 3. He licked his lips and started to follow the girl, cracking in laughter as he ran in the shadows to keep up with the young girl. The next couple of years were sure going to be fun, well to him. It would be torture for the girl, but she'll thank him when she finally completes his training. Well, until then he can have all the fun he wanted. I am actually surprised that you were able to dodge a few of my kunai, Hikaru said, grinning at the panting girl, who was currently clutching her stomach in pain. He took the kunai from the tree and put it right back into his osler. You are evil, Elysia panted, glaring at the spiky-haired boy. I am not evil, Hikaru said, putting his hands behind of his head. I prefer to think that I am quite sadistic to my students. Quite sadistic? You are very sadistic, Elysia yelled. The son of Apollo chuckled at the girl's words and ruffled her hair before saying, but that was only a warm-up. Now I am going to start with your taijutsu before moving on to chakra control. Taijutsu? Elysia asked, arching her eyebrows. Please don't tell me that you are going to teach me the theory of taijutsu as well. Hikaru blinked his eyes in shock before rubbing the back of his neck. No, as much as I would love to torture you with the theory of it, I won't. As it's basically pointless to teach you the theory when it demands exercise. Now, I wish for you to do 110 push-ups, after that I want you to do the same amount for sit-ups and squats, but I want you to do 150 tree punching. Elysia opened her mouth to protest, but closed before nodding her head at him, realizing just how stupid it would be if she complains. Smiling, Hikaru leaned against the tree and took out a book, pretending that he wasn't watching the young girl as she started to do her push-ups. This will be a test on her awareness and endurance. He wouldn't expect her to finish the exercises that he gave her, simply being that it was just too much for the girl to do, which might be a bit cruel to her, but he had always been a believer that tough love will make a person stronger. What in Hades is that girl doing? Hikaru looked up from his book and blinked his eyes at the sight of an angry Annabeth, who seemed ready to throttle him. He didn't know why the daughter of Athena was here, but he supposed it might have to do with the capture the flag that was going to happen soon. She is being trained. Annabeth pursed her lips at the simple explanation and crossed her arms at him while giving him a pointed look. Hikaru simply smiled sleepily at her and stretched his arms, glancing at the girl, who was now on her 12th push-up. She doesn't seem tired yet. Why is she being trained like this? Before Chiron was sacked, he asked me to train Elysia into becoming a capable kunoichi. He answered, flickering his blue eyes towards the clouds, then towards her. Lady Aphrodite wished to see her granddaughter to be a very capable kunoichi by the time she turns 12. She's a granddaughter of Aphrodite? Annabeth asked, looking at the young girl in surprise. But she used lightning. I thought that she was. It isn't every day. I see. The great Annabeth chase flustered. Hikaru teased, putting his hands into his pocket while smiled sleepily at her. Can't wait to tell Connor and Travis about this. If you dare. Annabeth flashed her dagger threateningly at him. The spiky-haired boy nodded his head unenthusiastically at the girl and returned his attention to Elysia. His lips curled into a small smile. As he notices that the girl was trying her hardest not to stop doing the exercise. The girl was surpassing his expectation. He had thought that the girl would get tired after 10 push-ups, but she was still going at it. This girl was truly different from the others kids that he knew. Why can she produce lightning if her grandmother is Aphrodite? Did her mother have a child with Zeus? Annabeth asked, narrowing her eyes at him. No, her father isn't Zeus. Hikaru said quietly. Her father was the son of Zeus. Annabeth gawked at this piece of information, and if it had been anyone else, he would have laughed at their reaction. He knew that for Annabeth that this piece of information might change her view of things. Then the prophecy? He never did it, as he hadn't come to this world after he turned 14, or so I heard. Hikaru answered, rubbing the back of his neck. I don't know much about her father except from what Chiron had told me and from my village. Is it possible that? Annabeth quietly asked herself, staring at the blonde-haired girl. The black-haired boy scratched his chin, looking quite interested to know what the younger girl was talking about. He heard Chiron talking about it once to Annabeth, but he never learned the whole thing except the children of the big three. If only he had taken the time to listen in on them. Hikaru-sensei, is it possible that I can take a rest? Elysia asked. Nope. You still need to do the exercise that I set up for you, Hikaru said, grinning at her. After you finish those exercises, then I may consider allowing you to have a good half an hour rest. The girl groaned at this new piece of information, but now had more vigor to complete her exercises. She wanted a break from this insane teacher. Annabeth didn't like the look on Hikaru's face. If anything, she was terrified by the look on his face. She had never seen such an evil smile on his face before, not even during Capture the Flag. I haven't even started on getting her ass whooped yet. Hikaru mumbled. If I hadn't known that the academy had gotten worse, then I would have made her spar with me. You are insane, Hikaru. Annabeth muttered, looking at the young girl in pity. I think I get it now why you and Kayla would make a good couple. The black-haired boy's face turned bright red at the girl's words. Annabeth chuckled at him, causing his face to turn even a brighter shade of red. There was something amusing about teasing him and her elder sister. I don't like Kayla like that. Could have fooled me. Annabeth called as she walked away from the elder boy. "Who's this Kayla girl?" Elysia asked, doing her 27th push-up. Hikaru smiled evilly at the girl, and the blonde knew from that smile that she was going to have even more training from the evil teacher. Why the hell did she have to ask him such a stupid question when she knew that he was going to give her even more training because of the silly question? "I am adding another 10 push-ups for you." Elysia blanched at this and worked harder on during her push-ups. Jake blinked his eyes at the sight of a tired, bruised and irritated Elysia, who took a seat beside him. "You look like you have been in a fight," Jake commented, noticing the bruises on the girl's hands and legs. Elysia glared at the boy and attempted to steal his food, but was foiled by said boy as he slapped her hand before she even took a slice of meat. She glared at him even harder, causing him to stick out his tongue at her. The people around them were laughing at this display. "I truly hate Hikaru-sensei," Elysia said, rubbing her sore arms as she remembered the tortuous taijutsu exercises that the boy had made her go through. Not only did he make her do those insane exercises, but taught her a kata of a unique taijutsu that he himself had made. Did she mention that he had made her repeat those kata over 200 times? Or give her an extra 10 after she tried to take a rest? Well, he did. Now after eating breakfast, he was going to teach her chakra control. "Come on, Hikaru can't be that bad of a teacher," Jake said, running his hand through his hair as he thought of a prank. The blonde didn't answer, deciding that it was best to steal his food before he even realizes that she had done it. Jake shook his head and turned his attention to the blonde, noticing that she was eating his barbecue chicken. He opened his mouth to complain but decided against it. Elysia looked like she needed all the food that she can get. "Just take my food, Elysia," Jake said, handing her his plate. But I am not as hungry as you." The blonde hesitated, but saw the earnest look in his eyes telling her that it was okay for her to take some of his food. She looked at the plate filled with meat and pasta, then to the boy, feeling guilty for stealing his food. Slowly, she gave the food back to him, but he shook his head at her and firmly told her that she needed the food more than him. She hesitated before thanking him. "So, what did Hikaru did to you to make you look so bruised up?" Just remembering what Hikaru did to her was enough for her to blanch. Jake watched as the blonde played with her food, making him wonder what Hikaru had done to the girl. "Made me do 200 laps around the whole of camp, and he also made me do 110 push-ups before making me do the same amount for sit-up and squats. When I finished that, he made me do." "Stop it. Just hearing it makes it even more painful," Jake said, putting his hands in the air. Elysia took a strong bite off the meat before saying, "I am the one that has to do the training," she argued, and he said that was only for a beginner. Jake bit his lips as he thought about what the girl must be feeling from doing such harsh training. Now, he can understand why the girl seems so exhausted, because she must have been doing this training from early in the morning till now, without having any breaks. He was surprised that she wasn't falling down from sheer exhaustion. "So are you free after this?" Jake asked, looking at the younger girl in curiosity. The blonde grimaced and shook her head at him. "I am going to start on chakra control exercises as soon as I finish the food," she answered. "I just hope that it won't be as bad as this morning." She took a huge gulp of water, feeling a lot better with some water. Hikaru had basically banned her from drinking water during her training, saying that she won't have this luxury when she was on a mission. Always be prepared for the unexpected, that was what Hikaru had said before he allowed her to eat lunch. Unexpected her ass, he just wanted to torture her even more. "So, when are you free?" Jake asked, touching his pockets. He looked extremely nervous as he asked this, causing her to feel a little bit perplexed at this strange behavior. Frowning, Elysia racked her brain as she tried to remember the free time that Hikaru would give her. There would be no genjutsu or ninjutsu training today because Hikaru said that she didn't have necessary chakra control to do them, whatever that meant. Puffing a stand of hair away from her face, Elysia started to muse over about her sadistic and harsh teacher. He was actually the first teacher besides Iruka to teach her and actually take the motive to teach her. Despite her complaining about his harsh trainings, Elysia actually found some satisfaction after finishing the exercise, especially after Hikaru would compliment her, also giving her a prize of a 2-minute break before making her go on to the next training. Sighing, Elysia stood up and was about to make her way towards the forest but was stopped by Jake, who caught her arm before she could even stand. "Hey, princess, can I come and see your training?" Jake asked, trying to pull off the puppy dog look. The blonde eyebrows twitched at the word princess, and the lightning sparks coming out of her forehead made everyone scoot further away from the two. None of them want to be made into charcoal, like the boy beside the girl. "Don't say yes, Elysia. My little brother here has been trying to skip training for the last few days," one of Jake's older brothers said, glaring at the smiling boy. "It may not seem like it, but this troublemaker tries to find any to skip training." "If I am a troublemaker, then what does that make you?" Smiling at the bickering brothers, Elysia took the apple from the plate and made her way towards the training field. Scanning the forest, Elysia noticed that the blue-eyed boy was currently talking to a girl around her age, who seemed to look quite confused as well as angry about something. The girl looked a little bit of Hikaru with her blue eyes, but other than that, they didn't seem to look related. Despite the girl having glossy black hair, it was of a lighter shade than Hikaru, and her face was definitely not like Hikaru, who looked a little bit like Sasuke, except for the face. Thank goodness that he didn't have the same face as Sasuke. "Listen to me, Rosie, I am not going to train you," Hikaru said, looking at the younger girl with a serious expression. "You don't have the heart of shinobi and have no idea of what you will be putting yourself into." "But you are training a girl around my age," Rosie said, angrily. "I'm your sister and I deserve the some right to be trained like her. I want to be able to defend myself from those." Hikaru has a sister? Elysia thought, gaping at the scene in front of her. "Rosie, are you being bullied?" Hikaru asked, looking quite angry at the mere idea of his sister being bullied. "No," Rosie said, looking away from her brother's eyes, "but I just want to be as strong as you. No one seemed to think less of you and everyone seems to respect you." Laughing bitterly, Hikaru looked at his sister as he clenched his hands into a fist. "I wasn't always respected, Rosie," he said tiredly. "I was an outcast to my own family. They treated me like dirt, hated me for reasons beyond my own control." But you are strong," Rosie said, looking at him angrily. "You are stronger than any of the Aries kids, and you're wise and—" "I am not wise, Rosie," Hikaru said sharply, seemingly to place his stare at Elysia's hiding spot. "There are many things that I do that are wrong. I had an opportunity to change the future, but I had decided to let it go through. Instead, I decided not to change it." "You always have a good reason." "Good reason, maybe," Hikaru said in amusement as he closed his eyes. "Big brother, you're being lazy. What if your student comes here and sees you being lazy?" Rosie yelled, waving her hand threateningly at him. "She will be extremely surprised, seeing as I have been training her to the bone," Hikaru said tiredly. "And I deserve to be lazy, Rosie. Doesn't your big brother deserve to be laid back once in a while?" "You're always laid back," Rosie cried. Hikaru chuckled and said, "Elysia-chan, can you come and tell my adorable little sister that I am not laid back?" The blonde blinked her eyes before stepping out of the tree shadows. The black-haired boy flashed her a smile before jumping off the tree, while the girl Rosie stared at her, tilting her head at the sight of the bruise arms that was now nearly healed. Hikaru pursed his lips at the nearly healed bruises, looking at them with suspicion and weariness. The blonde shrugged her shoulders at this. It was quite normal for her injuries to heal quickly, though she did wonder why this one took so long to heal. "Is my brother laid back when he is teaching you?" Elysia hesitated, not knowing how to deal with a girl that seemed to be a bit bossy. In one hand, she could lie and say that Hikaru was very laid back when training her and this could be her payback for the training, but on the other hand, if she told her the truth, then the girl can relax a little and the sensei may lighten the training. "Oh, what to do? He is killing me with the training," she admitted, glaring at the smiling boy. "He made me do 200 laps around the camp and made me do 110 push-ups and the same amount for sit-up, squats. After that he made me Stop, I see your point. Rosie said, grinning at her. My brother is basically killing you with the training. The older boy grinned at this, seeming to look proud at his sister's words. Rosie rolled her eyes at her older brother's behavior while the blonde felt instantly scared for the training to come. Memories of this morning's jog ran through her mind as she thought about what the beginning exercise might be. She was going to be extremely tired if it turns out that the beginning exercise might be something like that. Now you believe me when I say that I'm not that laid back? Hikaru asked, grinning at his younger sister. I'm actually training this girl really hard and you know how slothful I am. Unfortunately. Rosie muttered, crossing her arms at her brother, it is still a wonder when you come to archery. Oh come on, I am not that lazy. Hikaru pouted. I actually found those lessons more enjoyable than the ninja lessons that I had to learn. Like how you're teaching me. Hikaru crossed his arms and smiled at the young girl. Not exactly, my training is a little bit more harsh, he said happily. Now, I have a question to ask of you. A question? Oh boy. Rosie muttered as she placed her hands onto her face, already guessing what her brother was about to ask. What is a ninja? Hikaru asked, surprising both Elysia and Rosie with his question. And don't give me a textbook answer, tell me what you think a ninja is. A ninja is someone that can do ninjutsu, genjutsu and taijutsu, can't they? Isn't that a ninja? She asked, looking confused at him. I mean, isn't a ninja that can do cool stuff? Yes, Hikaru, isn't that a ninja? Hikaru twitched his eyebrows at his sister's question but kept his temper in check. I gave this lecture to our siblings so many times. He muttered, and here, I thought that my baby sister had listened to me. Rosie smiled sheepishly at him. I can give you the long answer from the textbook, but that's going to be too long and boring. Hikaru said, yawning at the two of them. A ninja is basically someone that has been taught how to use their chakra. Chakra? Elysia asked, recalling a hazy memory of Iruka-sensei's lecture on chakra. Don't tell me the academy hasn't taught you that, Hikaru said, looking at her with disbelief. He rubbed the back of his neck as he thought of an easy way to explain to the girl without making it seem so confusing. No, Iruka-sensei taught us about it, but I might have forgotten about it. I see. Hikaru said, smiling in amusement at her while Rosie shook her head at the blonde sympathetically, having been at that situation many times. Well, chakra is a bit like cooking. Rosie arched her eyebrows at this while Elysia looked very interested at his analogy. Hikaru smirked as he rubbed the back of his neck, trying to ease the ache in his neck. Well, think like this, the ingredients is the physical energy while the cook's cooking is the spiritual energy, and the end result will be the food that he makes, which is the chakra that you use. Hikaru explained, giving them a grin. That makes more sense than whatever Iruka taught me. Elysia admitted. I knew what physical energy and mental energy is, but Iruka-sensei always made it too long and complicated, or that might be because I never listened to his long lectures. Don't worry, Elysia. I was the same at that age, Hikaru said, smiling at the memory. Drove my teacher nuts whenever I didn't pay attention to him. Any legacy or half-blood has ADHD and dyslexia. Rosie explained, looking frustrated at this. It's so frustrating. Hikaru chuckled at this and ruffled his little sister's hair before looking at Elysia, who seemed to be stiff as if she was expecting torture. Well, sadly chakra control doesn't have any form of torture that he can use. Not yet at least. Now, Elysia-chan, tell me, do you know how to focus your chakra yet? No, Hikaru-sensei. Elysia admitted, bitterly as she clenched her hands into a fist. The more and more they talk about chakra, the more she felt horribly behind by her classmates, who might have known the answers to his question. Rosie frowned at the tone in the girl's voice. Hikaru's eyes softened at the young girl, remembering how he had felt when his uncle had seemed to be disappointed and angry when he couldn't even access his own chakra after a few days when Itachi could do it after 2 days. He bit his lip at the memory, trying desperately to stop himself from remembering those painful days. The pain made him forget about those days, and reminded him that he needed to pay attention to Elysia. He sighed at the sight of the girl's sad expression. It reminded him of the days when he truly thought that he was weak for not being good enough in his family's eyes. Elysia-chan, look at me, Hikaru ordered. The young girl looked up and was taken back by the understanding look in his eyes. You are not in any way stupid or weak for not knowing this, Hikaru said, looking very serious with the lack of smile. This just means, I know what to work with you. But my classmates, you are different from your classmates, Hikaru said, smiling at her. Not only are you a legacy of Zeus and Aphrodite, but you have inherited their abilities, meaning you got more potential than any of them. Rosie took this as her cue to leave her brother and his new student alone, to have their talk. She left quietly, taking one last glance at the pair of them, smiling at the thought of making a new friend. How can I have more potential than my classmates? The teachers often say that Sasuke is a genius and that I have no talent. Everyone says that, Elysia said, clenching her hands in anger and bitterness while lightning sparks came out of her forehead. Elysia-chan, look at me, Hikaru said, forcing the girl to look at him by turning her head at him. You have talent. Anyone with brains can see that. You have incredible amount of stamina for a kid your age, as you got tired about over halfway through your laps. Elysia opened her mouth to protest, but closed it because of the glare directed from Hikaru. I ran away from the village because of many reasons, but one of them is how lightly they used the word genius. Hikaru said calmly. A genius is not Sasuke because he does not see the world differently, he sees it like any other child. Geniuses are people with unique thinking and have seen things that people do not perceive as important. They are? Hikaru grinned and nodded. Did you know that the Yondaime Hokage was actually dyslexic and had ADHD? He asked her. Elysia's eyes widened at this piece of information, gaping at him. You got to be kidding me, she said. But he's. There are many things that people don't know, Hikaru said wisely. A wise person will keep his cards in check and reveal only the necessary information as well as observe the people around them, just to know who is a friend or an enemy. Really? Yes. Hikaru said, softly. Know, Elysia-chan, that in the ninja world that no one can be trusted, not even your own friend or relative. There might be a day when they may decide to kill you. The blonde frowned and opened her mouth to ask him but decided against it, having the feeling that he was talking more about himself than her. Now, do you know about the standard hand seals of the shinobi world? Elysia nodded and said, yes, but Tanaka-sensei hadn't gotten that far yet, saying that we're not ready yet. Not ready my ass, Hikaru muttered. Anyone in a clan knows how to use their chakra by the time they turn 7 or 8. The blonde frowned at this revelation but shrugged her shoulders, knowing that getting angry will not fix her problem in school. At least she had Hikaru to teach her how to use her chakra. I can't teach you chakra control until you can access your chakra, Hikaru said to the girl. So, your first lesson is to focus your chakra, which is quite simple for a trained shinobi, but might be difficult for you because you're new, so don't get disappointed if you can't do it straight off the bat. Hikaru weaved his hands into a hand seal, showing how his fingers were aligned to Elysia. This is the hand seal, Ram. It is one of the standard hand seals of the shinobi world, Elysia. It basically means that everyone in the ninja world uses the same hand seal. Now, jutsu are usually done in a sequence of hand seals. However, in your case, if you were to use a Fuden jutsu or Raiden jutsu, you wouldn't need to, but this is only an assumption, Hikaru said, pursuing his thin lips at her. I will need to do some research with you on that theory. Now, I don't want you to do any of the chakra when I am not here, Hikaru said to her, looking quite grave as he said this. There is a huge chance that you will get injured or you might hurt the people around you. You will do exactly as I say and no other way, without any questions. Got it, Elysia? Yes, Hikaru-sensei, Elysia nodded, looking as serious as her teacher. The son of Apollo grinned, blue eyes twinkling. Now, this is how you focus your chakra. I'm happy to see that you are interested in Elysia's training, Jake. Hikaru said tiredly, looking down to see the young boy, frowning at the blonde. Yawning, Hikaru jumped down from the tree, regretting the fact that he couldn't have more time to sleep. He was honestly tired from today's events, as well as having to wake up early to think of his training. "I know that you have a question to ask of me," Hikaru stated, at the smiling son of Hermes. Jake's smile was quickly wiped off and it was soon replaced with a serious look. "You shouldn't hurt Elysia," Jake said, angrily. "Do you know that she looked like she was going to die in any minute?" "That's the idea," Hikaru said casually, smirking at the furious boy. "I am going to." "Kill me?" Hikaru said, arching his eyebrows at the little boy. "Come to kill me in a few years' time when you're my height at least or strong enough to land a punch on me." "Why do you have to do that her?" Jake asked angrily. "She is just a girl, Hikaru, and you are already making her." "Jake, she is strong enough to handle my training," Hikaru said calmly. "I have faith that she can handle it. She's only younger than you by 1 year, but has also been through some harsh times." What do you mean?" "Not my business to tell you, Jake," Hikaru replied. "Elysia is the only one that can tell you about her past." Jake opened his mouth to protest, but remembered that he would be angry too if someone knew about his past as well. He crossed his arms and leaned against the tree trunk and looked at the blonde, whose face was scrunched up in concentration. Girls were often in his mind really evil with their ever-changing behavior and were also strange, not liking violence and preferring to play with dolls. He often thought that girls behaved like this, but meeting Elysia changed that assumption about girls. This might be because she was different. "Hikaru, is it strange that I find Elysia's oddness to be good?" Jake asked. "I mean, isn't being strange bad?" The blue-eyed boy pondered over the question and answered. "Strange can be seen either ways, as being bad or good, because sometimes odd people can be the most understanding people that you will meet or the most insane." "Then what type does Elysia belong to?" "Elysia is normal, Jake, but if she is strange then I say the understanding one," Hikaru said, smiling at him. "So, how are things going with Kayla and you?" Hikaru's eyebrows twitched. Just when he thought that the brat had learned his lesson about instituting something between him and Kayla. "Jake, for the last time, I do not have any feelings." Hikaru didn't finish his sentence as Elysia had run to them, having a huge smile on her face. Hikaru-sensei, Elysia said. "I think I can do it." Hikaru snapped his head to face her, jaw open in shock. "What?" he asked in unison, convinced that they had misheard. "I think I managed to focus on my chakra," Elysia exclaimed. The black-haired boy jumped and took a leaf before landing gracefully on his feet, causing both Jake and Elysia to look at him in confusion. The boy ignored their questioning looks, looking at the blonde with a pursed lips as well as having a glint in his eyes that seemed to be amused. "I want you to focus your chakra to your forehead like I told you," Hikaru ordered the girl. The blonde nodded her head eagerly before forming a hand seal, scrunching her face as she concentrated. After a few seconds, the son of Apollo put the leaf against Elysia's forehead. The leaf stuck as if it had been glued on the girl's forehead. Hikaru ruffled her hair and declared, "Well, it seems that you were able to focus your chakra less than 5 hours. A whole new record." "She did well." "Yes, Jake, she did well," Hikaru said, ruffling the boy's hair as well. "It just means that you have no idea about the trouble you will be in." Elysia and Jake had a bad feeling about this. "By the way, why are you here?" Elysia asked, realizing that the boy was here instead of training. The brown-haired boy slung his arm around the girl's shoulder, causing her to arch her eyebrows at him while Hikaru chuckled at this. The boy dug through his jeans pocket and handed the girl a pair of blue butterfly clips. Elysia was surprised at this sudden present. "Why?" "For saving my life," Jake answered. "Also, you can consider this as your present for focusing your chakra, princess." The blonde's eyebrows twitched and a lightning bolt was now heading towards the boy, who had started to run before the girl even had used the move. Hikaru laughed out loud as he watched Elysia chase after the boy, but he felt uneasy as if a part of him felt like the two of them will not have much time with each other. He shook his head and decided that it would be time to meet with Kayla. It wasn't like his sense of foreboding as a premonition of the future. Hikaru never realized just how wrong he was until it was too late. I want to thank everyone that reviewed the last chapter and added this to their favorites and follows. Chapter 5 Disclaimer. I do not own Naruto or the Percy Jackson series. Please support the official release. Co-written by Engineer Forever. Author note. Happy New Year's everybody. I realized that it had been a while since I last updated this story, but school had caught up to me. Elysia always felt like she didn't belong anywhere. The kids in her class all belonged to a group. The girly girls were one group, the troublemakers were another group, etc., but she didn't belong to any of those groups. She certainly didn't feel like she belonged in the village, and those who always resided in it just glare at her. It may be because she was different from them and they didn't like it. Yet, here she felt like she belonged. No one thought she was freak because of her strange abilities. In fact, some of them understood the pain of not fitting in. It was nice not being judged, and everyone was nice. Well, except Mr. D and Tantalus. Now, those two weren't the nicest people to hang around, Tantalus more than Mr. D. It would hurt her when she had to leave the camp, especially now when she finally got some of her first friends. Every day after her training, she along with Jake and Rosie would lay down on the fields and they will talk before playing a game. Like what they were doing now. Currently, her two friends were arguing about Jake skipping training. You need to stop doing pranks and take your training seriously. Jake. Rosie reprimanded, glaring at the boy. But it's just so tiring to do training, isn't it, Elysia? Jake said, smiling at the blonde. The blue-eyed girl arched her eyebrows at him. I will admit that training is tiring. Jake smirked at this, but it is a good idea to train after all, it will make us stronger. I told you so. Rosie said, grinning at him. Well, I just find it too tiresome to go. He said firmly, why go to training when I could be doing better things? Like what? Elysia asked with clear skepticism in her tone. Well, getting some sleep and doing pranks, of course. The boy said as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. Rosie and Elysia stared at each other before rolling their eyes at him. He pouted at them, causing the two girls to giggle at him, but his pout turned into an impish grin at the two giggling girls. The blonde knew that would be his answer, but the way he would say it with a straight face made her laugh. Hey, Elysia, I forgot to ask, but how was your training? Rosie asked. My brother isn't slacking off. I can tell from that grimace that it had to be awful, Jake stated, noticing Elysia's grimace. The blonde nodded and said, today had been the worst one yet. Elysia winced as she remembered the hellish training that Hikaru had put her through. The son of Apollo had made her do 250 laps around the camp with him throwing weapons at her. After that he made her do 300 push-ups and punches to a tree. He also made her learn and repeat the katas for 4 hours straight before allowing her to take a 5-minute break before making her do the chakra control exercise that he had taught her last week. After that he had made her climb the trees with her hands, but this time, he had put weights in both her hands and legs. It can't be that bad, Rosie said. He made me do 250 laps around the camp, and if that wasn't bad enough, he threw kunai at me. I barely dodged them, Elysia said, showing her friend her scarred arms. When that was done, he made me do 300 push-ups, and if I took a break, he gave me an extra 50. When I finished those, he made me do punch the trees 300 times. After that he made me. Stop telling us this, Jake cried. Just hearing it makes my body ache. I am doing the training, not you, Elysia said angrily, sparks radiating out of her forehead. You don't even bother to go to your training. You're right, Jake said. The blonde narrowed her eyes at him, suspicious at the change of behavior. The boy always seemed ready to make her irritated, but this time, he agreed with her. Something wasn't right. I can't see my brother being a sadist, Rosie said, snapping her from her thoughts. He is just so easygoing that I can't take him seriously. I know that he's strong, but it is just so hard to believe. How strong is he anyway, Rosie? Jake asked. Are the rumors true? Hikaru is strong, that much anyone can agree on. Rosie said reluctantly. He is as strong as rumors say he is, but I can say that he certainly can't lift an elephant. You should know because you begged him to, Jake said, grinning at her. Who told you about that? Rosie hissed with a small blush of embarrassment. Your sister. Jake answered teasingly. Rosie growled at that, and Elysia had the feeling that Rosie's sister was going to be in big trouble. The blonde smiled at the thought and lay down on the field, hoping that it would ease the pain in her body. Life in this place was so interesting and fun. There wasn't a single boring day in this camp. Through the training was completely tortuous. It was still a surprise that she was still doing some of the camp activities, such as learning to use a sword. Unconsciously, the blonde touched her hairpins and smiled. The hairpins that Jake gave her helped her hair from falling on her face. They were also by far her favorite gift, since it was also the only gift that she had received. She shook her head and concentrated on her friends. Hikaru has been acting strange through. Rosie said, biting her lip as she picked up a flower from the field. He's been acting so secretive. He goes out late at night and comes back in the morning. Sometimes, I catch him frowning and muttering words about war. Not only has he been secretive, but also his behavior is strange. He's actually going to training. I don't get this change in behavior at all. Do any of you have an idea why? She asked with worry. Maybe he's had a change of heart, Jake suggested, shrugging at the girl. I don't really know, I am not your brother's best friend. Elysia. I'm his student, but he won't confide to me. Elysia admitted. Has anything like this happened before? Surely you must have some idea on this change in behavior. The black-haired girl licked her lips before frowning at the two of them. The descendant of Zeus closed her eyes as she thought about Hikaru's behavior towards her. There hasn't been any real change that she could have noticed. If there was, then her sensei hid it real well. Well, the last few days before Luke left camp, Hikaru had been on edge. Rosie answered. He and Luke never got along, but on the last few days, he had been nice to him. Yay, that had been strange. Jake agreed with a hum in thought. Luke and Hikaru never got along with each other. Yet, the last few days he had been so nice to him that, so I thought that they had patched things up. If that isn't strange, whenever one of my brothers talk bad about Luke, he didn't say anything that indicate that he agrees with them or not. Rosie said softly. A year ago, he would agree with them, but now he's quiet about it. It's almost like he knows something that we don't. But that's impossible. Hikaru would tell us if he knew that Luke would betray us. Who's Luke? Elysia asked, tilting her head at them. Luke is my half-brother. Jake said calmly. He is a traitor that had tried to kill Percy and has sided with Kronos. It's a pity that I am related to him, and I can't forget what he did to our cabin by joining him. Jake, Elysia said softly, looking at her friend with concern. The funny thing is that I will forgive him the moment he comes back, Jake said, smiling at the two shocked girls. After all, he is my brother and I always forgive my family. Elysia didn't miss the pained look on Jake's face as he said this. There was something that he wasn't telling them, something to do with his family. She frowned. Now that she thought about it, she didn't know anything about Jake's mortal parent. Did he have siblings? Was he a year camper like Rosie and Hikaru, or was he here only for the summer? So many questions that she hasn't even asked. You know it's all right if you don't forgive Luke, Rosie said. None of us will think any less of you. I will forgive him because he's my brother, not because I think that people will think less of me, he said firmly. I am sure that Luke had his reasons for betraying the gods. What would be his reason then? They're our parents and you think it is okay for him to betray them, Rosie yelled, gritting her teeth at him. I don't think it is okay, but he must have a reason, Jake said. There was no trace of happiness as he said this. If it had been Hikaru that betrayed the camp, would you think any less of him? Would you think that he's an idiot to do it? Of course not, Rosie said angrily. Hikaru would have a good reason to betray them. Elysia kept quiet and watched as the two of them argue. She looked at the pine tree that stood alone in the hill and then to her two friends. It must be nice to have siblings. Of course, she had her aunts and uncles from her mother, but it wasn't the same. They treated her like a little kid that needed to be coddled and hugged, always with the hugs. It was nice and all, but they didn't think she was old enough to even hold a sword. She was a ninja in training for Zeus' sake. She could learn to use a sword. That's why I think that Luke has a good reason for betraying us, Jake said. I have known him for 2 years and I know that he isn't an idiot. He has to have a good reason for doing what he did. And what if you were wrong, Jake? What if he still doesn't have a good reason? Would you still forgive him? Elysia asked, drawing their attention to her. Yes, I will still forgive him because he is still my brother and he has a good heart, Jake said, smiling softly at her. Then Jake, you're a baka, Elysia said angrily. That's good, right? Jake asked as he turned to Rosie. Rosie shrugged, looking just as mystified as Jake about what she just said. The blonde made no attempt in explaining to him about the word she just used. Telling him would just be too tiring since he would tell her that he was no idiot when he really was. Seriously, he would forgive his own brother for what he did. Only an idiot would do it. So guys, do you want to help me with a prank? Jake asked, giving the two of them an impish smile. Who in Hades do you want to prank? Rosie asked. On my lovely 2 older brother, Travis and Connor. Those 2 wouldn't let me help them in repairing the chariot. Jake grumbled, it isn't like I would break it or anything. Elysia and Rosie glanced at each other before nodding their heads at him. He grinned at them and slung his arm around the blonde while gesturing to the daughter of Apollo to come closer. The descendant of Zeus shook her head at Jake's plan, muttering some suggestions to him. The older boy would shake his head at her suggestion before suggesting a different plan. Rosie would shake her head at him and give the boy reasons on why it wouldn't work. The blonde would grin at the arguing pair before suggesting an idea that all 3 of them will agree. Planning the prank with them had strengthened the idea that she belonged in this camp, not in Konoha. But in a week, summer would end, which meant she would have to go back to that damn village of hers. She wished that she could stay here for the whole year, but that nice lady had firmly told her that she had to go back there. But for now, Elysia would try to enjoy her leftover time at Camp Half-Blood. Hikaru growled as he threw a book at the wall, causing his siblings to look at him as if he was insane. Maybe he was crazy, but the book had been no help in figuring out with his dilemma. If only he could tell someone about this problem, but the only trustworthy person had been fired. He kicked the chair and tousled his hair in frustration. None of his siblings knew of this power of his. To be honest, not even his aunt knew of this ability. It was both a curse and a gift. People say that seeing the future is a gift, but they never really see it as a curse. Knowing that you can prevent the future was a curse because there was always the possibility that you could make the future worse. Hikaru, are you okay? Will stuttered. I'm fine, Hikaru said, smiling at him. Tell me, Will, have you seen Kayla? Will asked, smirking at his older brother. Are you finally going to ask her out? The black-haired boy blushed before glaring at his brother. The younger boy gulped when he saw his brother's hand reaching for his kunai. He took several steps back as Hikaru inspected his kunai. Their other siblings shook their heads at him. Will, you have 5 seconds to run away before I throw this kunai at you, Hikaru said, smiling at him. Come on, can't we talk rationally about this? The boy said in a panic. Hikaru tilted his head and looked at him thoughtfully. His younger brother gave him a hopeful look and he considered the idea of not hurting his brother. It was the first time that his brother teased him about his feelings for Kayla. His younger brother would not be foolish to repeat the same mistake. His feelings for Kayla were very platonic, or that was what he convinced himself. You are forgiven, Will, Hikaru said quietly. I wasn't really going to throw that kunai at you anyway. Why are you angry anyway? I'm having a bad day, Will, he answered quietly. I had the most unpleasant nightmare and I wish to forget about it. It was so bad that you resorted to kicking a chair, Will asked, not looking convinced at his words. I never said that I was sane, did I? Number you didn't, and none of us think that you are sane. Hikaru waited till Will left before picking up his book and notes. The book was something that his uncle had given him when he was 4 years old. That had been the only day that man didn't seem to hate him. He smiled bitterly at the thought and skimmed through the book. This book told the history of their clan, and the boy thought it would be the best way to learn about the founder of his clan. He closed his eyes and remembers the man that claimed to be Madara. There was no way that man had been Madara, but he couldn't be certain. Hikaru sighed. It would be nice if he also had the ability to summon the dead. It would make this job so much easier, but it would make it harder to keep it a secret. Hikaru, your girlfriend wants to talk to you, and she doesn't seem too happy, his older brother yelled, looking at him in amusement. Tell her, I'm busy, Hikaru said, reading through his notes. He didn't want to deal with an angry Kayla. She would rip him apart and ruin any chance of him reading his notes. I am not going near your girlfriend when she's angry. She would kill me, and I personally like living lil bro, his brother complained, smirking at him, so grow a pair and talk to her. The black-haired boy glared at his brother for that remark before putting his book away along with his notes, making sure to put it in a place that only he knew. It would do him no good if his siblings find them. Besides him, Michael was the only one between them that can read Japanese, and only because he had stayed in Japan for 2 years. They didn't need to know about the war just yet. They would panic. He smiled at the sight of an angry Kayla, who seemed to be pissed for some strange reason. The girl had been his first friend, and perhaps he may have some feelings for her. She was pretty and smart as well as feisty. Her long curly sandy blonde hair and stormy gray eyes were her most attractive features, along with her smile. He certainly wanted the pretty smile now and not scary scowl of hers. Hikaru Uchiha. Why have you been avoiding me for this long? Kayla asked, putting her hands on her hips. He gulped. Her putting her hands on her hips was never a good sign. I haven't been avoiding you, Hikaru stuttered. In the background, he could hear his siblings laughing at his misfortune. They were so going to get it later. I've just have been busy training Elysia and... Don't you dare use that cute little girl as an excuse, Kayla hissed. He nodded his head vigorously at her, causing his siblings to laugh even harder at him. Oh, when it comes to him they would laugh, but when they were on the receiving end they cried. Cowards. Look, I've been busy with training and other things, Hikaru admitted quietly. She arched her eyebrows at him and said, other things, huh? So those rumors about you dating Michelle are actually true. Why in Hades would I date that girl? She's nice and all, but she is so not my type, Hikaru said, and anyways, who I date is none of your business, Kayla. I know it isn't my business, Kayla said softly, but I really don't want to see my best friend getting his heart broken. Hikaru frowned. He shouldn't be sad that she confessed that. He was her best friend, yet it hurt. It was like a piece of his heart had been shattered by this confession. The boy shook his head and reminded himself that he shouldn't get himself involved with her, because in the end, it would end in heartbreak. He would have to go back to his village someday, no matter how much he didn't want to, and there was no way that he would allow her to get hurt. If anything were to happen to her, then he wouldn't be able to stop blaming himself. Elysia loved her aunts and uncles with all her heart, but they could be a bit annoying about love. She was way too young to think about love, and the mere idea of liking boy in that kind of way was just plain icky. Her aunt Selena said that she wouldn't find it gross when she was older. But she somehow doubted that. If that wasn't bad enough, her aunts and uncles were currently deciding what type of boy would be perfect for her. He has to be cute, one of her aunts yelled at her sister, who was currently writing the list of things that the boy must have. He needs to be sensitive, her aunt Selena added, peering down at the list. He so has to be rich, Drew said, causing a few of the girls to nod in agreement, but only Selena shook her head at this. Has to think that little Elysia here is the best thing that ever happened to him, Aunt Selena said, smiling at them. They all nodded in agreement and wrote that down on the list. He shouldn't have any mommy issues, one of her aunts yelled. Elysia frowned. She didn't understand why they were doing this and why now. She was still a kid, so there should be no reason why they make this list. Couldn't they make this list for Elena? She was the same age as Jake, who was 9 years old. She was 7 years old for Zeus' sake. He shouldn't have a tattoo. One of her uncles said, "Those boys are usually punks and Elysia doesn't need a bad boy in her life." But it would be so romantic if she was the only one that changed him to a good guy. One of her aunts gushed, "Imagine just how romantic it would be." "She'll get hurt because of that guy," Selena pointed out. "But it's still romantic." The girl whined a little. The blonde groaned and put her hands on her face, trying to hide her blush from her relatives. Why couldn't her mother be the daughter of Athena? It would have made her life a whole lot easier. Then again, she wouldn't have that cool power to control people, could she? Too bad she still couldn't control it that well, but it was better than before. "I don't understand why you're making this list. No guy will ever like me in that way," Elysia said, shaking her head at her relatives. "Besides, I'm 7 years old, why should I care about boys? They're icky," she added while sticking her tongue out with a look of disgust. "A lot of boys will like you in that way. How could they not? You are a sweet girl that loves to joke. Trust me when I say a lot of guys likes a girl with a sense of humor." One of her uncles said, "And I agree with you, 7 years old is not the age for you to think about boys. I don't know why your aunts seem to think it's a good idea." "Don't talk as if you are not least bit interested in her future love life," Aunt Michelle said, "and we want Elysia to consider these things for her future husband." "I don't really see the point. I mean, we are just going to end up breaking his heart for the Aphrodite's rite of passage," Drew said, looking at her nails with interest. Elysia frowned and asked, "What's the Aphrodite's rite of passage?" Everyone became quiet at this and all their faces seemed somber, which seemed strange to the young girl. They were always so happy, but the mere mention of this passage and they became so sad-looking. Her Aunt Drew was the only one that decided to speak and had a smirk on her face. "My dear cute little Elysia, the Aphrodite's rite of passage is something that a child of Aphrodite has to do to prove themselves worthy of our mother," she explained. "To do this, a boy or girl must fall in love with the child of Aphrodite and then you must break that person's heart." "That's horrible," Elysia yelled in shock. "You mean to tell me that all of you have done this?" "No, not all of us have done this," Selena said, putting her hands on the young girl's shoulder. The blonde tilted her head to look at her aunt and was taken back by the sad smile in her face. Out of all her aunts and uncles in this cabin, Selena was by far her favorite. "But most of you have done it. Didn't it hurt you when you broke their hearts?" the blonde yelled, gritting her teeth at them. "I'm sure Ka-san never broke someone's heart." None of them answered, but the pained expressions was all the answer she needed. The blonde clenched her hands into a fist and took out her hairpins before throwing them at them in a fit of rage. One of her relatives opened their hands to grab it, but closed it when they noticed that the hairpins were changing into swords. Immediately, they all ducked from the swords and just in the nick of time too. The swords were now wedged in the wall between a couple of movie star posters. Everyone stared at the sword in shock, but soon the shock was replaced with one of curiosity. "Elysia, who gave you those hairpins?" Selena asked with interest as she inspected them while pulling them out of the wall. The blonde looked down at her hands and answered, "Jake gave it to me as a present for saving him from those bulls." Everyone in the cabin was quiet at this, but after a minute they seemed to be grinning at her. The tiny blonde turned pale at the sight of their evil smiles. It was never a good sign when they had those smiles. Slowly, the blonde started to inch away from them and towards the door. "It seemed like Jake has a crush on you," Selena said, smiling mischievously at her as she changed the swords back to hairpins. "Only a boy with a crush would give such an expensive present." "Jake doesn't like me in that way. He's only my friend," Elysia yelled as sparks started to come out of her forehead. "It can grow into a very beautiful relationship," one of her aunts said with a giddy smile at her. Elysia sighed and quietly and thought that her family was crazy, but they were her crazy family. There was nothing that she wouldn't do to protect them, and in a year's time, she would see them again. For once, she had a family to call her own. She would even sacrifice her own life to save them, that was for certain. A.N. I want to thank everyone that reviewed the last chapter and added this to their favorites and follows. Hey guys, E4E here. Just want to say thanks for the support and hope you enjoy.